The sun had barely touched the horizon when the farm began to wake. Birds flitted from tree to tree, singing their morning songs, and the soft rustle of the wind through the fields made a gentle rhythm. The elderly woman moved slowly but with purpose. She had lived on this land for decades, and every corner of it was familiar. Her hands, though aged, knew the feel of the soil, the roughness of the hay, and the warmth of her animals. She worked quietly, talking to herself sometimes, laughing softly at memories that the morning light stirred. Her house, a simple structure of wood and brick, stood modestly among rows of crops with a small barn that had seen better days. Even so, it was home. She had no children living nearby, and neighbors were few and far between, leaving her in peace most days. She moved to the chicken coop first, opening the door with care. The chickens clucked and fluttered, eager for their morning feed. She scattered grains, smiling at the way one particularly bold hen pecked at her shoes. The woman hummed a tune from long ago, something her mother had sung, something that reminded her of strength even when life had been hard. She checked the eggs, collecting them with practiced hands, placing each gently into a basket. She had done this hundreds of times, yet it was never boring. Each egg, each bird, reminded her of a life she had built from nothing but hard work and determination. From the barn, she brought out her tools and moved toward the field. The crops swayed slightly in the morning breeze. Corn, beans, and a small patch of vegetables grew under her careful tending. Her eyes, sharp despite her age, scanned for weeds or signs of pests. She worked methodically, pulling weeds, checking soil moisture, and adjusting irrigation channels. To an outsider, she might have seemed like a simple farmer, a woman living out her final years in quiet solitude. But there was something about her presence that commanded respect. She moved with a rhythm that suggested a life lived with discipline, a past that was more than what met the eye. By mid-morning, she had finished with the fields and returned to the house for breakfast. A pot of porridge simmered on the stove, and she poured herself a bowl, adding a sprinkle of sugar. She ate slowly, savoring the warmth and comfort of food she had prepared herself. Outside, the sun climbed higher, and the distant hum of a tractor broke the silence. Her eyes flicked toward the horizon. She knew every sound of this land, every rustle in the trees, every distant animal call. Nothing escaped her notice. There was a peace in her routine, a security she felt in knowing her land and her limits. That peace, however, was fragile. The wind carried a different sound that morning, faint at first, almost unnoticeable, a low rumble that did not belong to her land. She stepped outside, adjusting her shawl, listening carefully. The sound grew slightly, not from the wind but from movement, vehicles on the dirt road that led to her farm. Her brow furrowed. Visitors were rare, and unexpected visitors often brought trouble. She walked toward the edge of her property, moving with surprising agility for someone her age. Her eyes narrowed, focusing on the approaching dust cloud. There were voices now, raised and rough, laughter that carried arrogance and disrespect. The intruders were a gang, as she would soon realize, young men who thought the world was theirs to take, who saw an old woman as an easy target. They drove slowly up the driveway, their vehicles kicking up dirt, engines loud and brash. The gang members leered at the house, mocking the simplicity of it. They had heard rumors that the woman who lived here was harmless, someone who would give up her land or money without a fight. They were wrong. She stood at the edge of her porch, watching them approach. Her eyes were calm, but they missed nothing. The leader of the group waved, a cruel smile on his face. "Morning, Granny," he shouted. "You got anything valuable we can take?" She smiled faintly, a small curve of her lips, not intimidated, not angry. She only nodded politely. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady, carrying a calm that unsettled them. There was a pause in their laughter, a brief hesitation. Something in her eyes gave away nothing, yet it made them pause just slightly. She didn't shout or scream. She didn't run. She simply stood there, watching, aware of every step they took, every gesture, every weapon they carried. The gang parked their vehicles haphazardly, getting out with swagger. They spread across the yard, speaking loudly, throwing careless glances at the house and barn. One of them stepped closer to the porch, reaching out to knock over a potted plant. She placed a firm hand on his arm, not forcefully, but with a presence that made him freeze. "Be careful," she said softly. Her tone did not carry threat, but there was authority in it, a quiet command that demanded attention. For a moment they laughed it off, thinking her frail and harmless. They moved toward the barn, planning to look for tools or equipment they could steal. She followed slowly, keeping her distance. letting them think she was merely an old woman watching their antics. Inside, they rummaged through crates and storage, talking over each other, teasing and bragging. She watched carefully, noting who was the leader, who was reckless, who might be distracted. She remembered her past. Every lesson in observation, patience, and precision. Her body, though older, remembered the drills, the discipline, the focus of a life that had not been ordinary. As they continued, one of the younger members made a sudden noise, knocking over a stack of old crates. The sound echoed through the barn, loud and jarring. He jumped back, cursing under his breath, while the others laughed. She remained still, heart steady, eyes fixed. Her fingers brushed against the edge of a nearby table, where a small antique rifle rested, cleaned and ready. It had been decades since she last used it in practice, but every memory of aim, breath control, and calculation came rushing back. She did not rush. She did not panic. She had time, more than they knew. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the yard. The birds had quieted, sensing the tension. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The gang continued to search, oblivious to the danger they walked into. She took a slow breath, centering herself, remembering every lesson, every shot, every moment of discipline from her past. They thought they had the advantage, thought they could intimidate her. They had no idea. They had walked into the territory of someone who had spent a lifetime mastering patience, observation, and precision. Her calm, measured presence made the air heavy with anticipation, though none of the gang yet realized it. Hours could have passed in that silence, though it might have been minutes. She moved inside, pretending to tend to the kitchen, all while keeping one eye on the barn and the yard. Every creak of the floorboard, every shuffle of feet she noticed. She had trained herself to detect the smallest shift in weight, the slightest movement. It was a skill she had honed over decades, and it had not left her. The gang, meanwhile, became bolder, laughing louder, thinking the day belonged to them. They had no idea that the woman they underestimated was about to remind them of a past they could never imagine. The sun was high when the first hints of a plan formed in her mind. She would not be taken by surprise. She would not let them ruin her life. And she knew, with a quiet certainty, that the balance of power was about to shift. Not with shouting or running, but with skill, patience, and knowledge. She moved toward the window that gave her the clearest view of the barn. She adjusted the curtains just so, positioning herself to watch, to calculate, to prepare. The wind carried the scent of dust and oil from their vehicles, mixing with the fresh smell of the farm. It was a strange mix, the ordinary and the threatening, the calm and the tension. She felt it all, accepted it, and waited. The day had begun quietly, but she knew it would not remain so. The farm was hers, and she would defend it in ways they could never imagine. By mid-morning, the gang had no clue how underestimated they were. They joked, they boasted, they thought themselves in control. But she watched, listening, noting every weakness, every mistake. Her heart remained steady, her mind sharp, her presence commanding in silence. She had lived a long life, and she had faced challenges no one could guess. Today would be no different. The farm was quiet, the sun warm, and the wind gentle. But danger had arrived, and she was ready. The peace of the morning was about to change, and the story of this day would become one that no one would forget. The gang moved around the farm with careless confidence, believing that the woman was too old to resist. They spread out, some wandering toward the barn, others near the edge of the fields, tossing small insults and laughing loudly. One of the younger men tried to kick over a small wooden crate, thinking it would scare her. She stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed lightly, her face calm. The action was simple, but her eyes were sharp, watching every detail of their movements. She noticed the way they carried themselves, who seemed reckless, who paid attention, who might be a problem if they got bold. They ignored her, thinking she would not interfere. One of them, taller than the others, swaggered up the steps, looking into the house. "This is your place?" "Not much here, Granny," he said, his voice thick with arrogance. She tilted her head slightly and replied, "It has everything I need." Her words were quiet, but there was something in her tone that made him hesitate for just a fraction of a second. It was enough to make him uncomfortable. He laughed it off, shaking his head, but the unease lingered. The woman turned back inside, pretending to move about the kitchen. She opened cupboards slowly, rearranging pots and pans, though her mind was elsewhere. She knew every step they took outside. Every creak of the floorboards, every shuffle in the dirt she noticed. Her hands brushed over the counter, almost touching her hidden tools while she calculated her next move. She did not rush. She had learned that impatience was a mistake. The gang would make their errors, and she would only need to respond at the right moment. Outside, one of the gang members began inspecting the barn more closely. He poked at old crates, tossing aside scraps of wood carelessly. Another approached the small chicken coop, laughing as he opened the door, letting the chickens scatter in a flurry of wings and feathers. They were loud, unthinking, and overconfident. The woman watched quietly, her eyes scanning the scene, noting their strengths and weaknesses. Every twitch, every glance, every overconfident step was information. She remembered her own training long ago. Years spent in discipline, hours spent perfecting precision and focus. Every detail mattered, and she had trained herself to anticipate movement and calculate timing. Though she had left that life behind, the skills remained. Her body moved with memory and experience, her mind sharp and alert. The gang might see an old woman, but she was more than that. She was a strategist, an observer, and a sharpshooter. They had no idea of the power she carried quietly beneath her calm exterior. One of the younger men, curious and daring, approached the porch again. He reached out to touch a railing as if testing her reaction. She looked at him steadily, her gaze unwavering. "Be careful where you put your hands," she said softly. He froze, unsure if she was joking. The others laughed, encouraging him to move closer, to prove he had nothing to fear. But he hesitated, the smallest crack in their confidence. It was the first sign that they were not fully in control. The leader of the gang, noticing the hesitation, clapped his hands together and called out, "All right, boys, don't just stand there. Check the house, check the barn, grab what you can. She won't stop us." They followed him, moving deeper into the property. The woman moved slowly inside, keeping out of sight, but her mind was working quickly. She knew every piece of cover, every line of sight, and every possible angle. She did not fear them, but she respected the danger they represented. Her life had taught her that underestimating anyone was a mistake. They found a shed filled with old tools, laughing as they tossed hammers and wrenches aside. One of them tried to pry open a locked cabinet, thinking it might hold something valuable. The sound of the lock struggling against the force they applied made a small echo through the shed. The woman leaned against the wall of her kitchen, listening carefully. Each sound was a piece of the puzzle, each mistake adding to the knowledge she needed. Her hands brushed over the edge of a small cabinet where she had hidden a rifle. She did not touch it yet. She waited. The sun moved across the sky, casting shifting shadows across the yard. The gang became more careless, moving with louder steps, making more noise, confident in their ability to intimidate her. One of them kicked a bucket, sending it clanging against the wall. They laughed at the sound, thinking it harmless. She only waited, her calm presence a contrast to their chaos. Inside, she took a breath, steadying herself. Her mind worked through scenarios, calculating timing, angles, and precision. She did not need to rush. They were giving her everything she needed. Suddenly, one of the men stepped too close to the porch railing, reaching to grab a decorative flower pot. She spoke again, quiet and measured. "That doesn't belong to you." His hand froze midair. The others looked puzzled. The boldness in her voice was unusual, and it gave a flicker of hesitation in their movements. They had assumed she would not care, would not react, but the calm authority in her voice caused even the boldest to pause. They laughed nervously, brushing it off, but the tension had entered the air. She moved to a side window, peeking just enough to see the barn. The gang continued to search, unaware that every action was noted. She noted who was reckless, who might stumble, who could be distracted. Every detail was important. She could see the leader shouting instructions, growing impatient. The overconfidence in their youth blinded them to the situation. She had seen such arrogance before, and she knew how quickly it could crumble with precision and patience. In her mind, she went through every option. She remembered old drills, times when patience and accuracy mattered more than force. Every movement, every word, every gesture from the gang was another clue. They were providing her the information she needed to act safely and efficiently. She did not rush. She did not panic. She had all the time in the world to make her move. This was her land, her home, and she had the experience to defend it. A young man, thinking he was clever, tried to sneak behind the barn. He thought no one would notice. She did. Her eyes followed him, noting his stride, the way he held himself, the rhythm of his movement. She smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. His arrogance would be his mistake. Inside, she prepared herself quietly, checking her rifle, making sure it was ready but keeping it hidden. Her hands moved with memory, recalling every skill she had learned over decades. She was calm, collected, and fully aware. The gang, now growing bolder, laughed louder, teasing each other, trying to seem fearless. But they were missing something. They could not see the patience, the quiet focus, and the control she possessed. They were outsiders to her world, unaware of the lifetime of discipline she had carried with her. They were giving her all the tools she needed. She was simply waiting for the moment when their carelessness would be their undoing. Time seemed to stretch as the morning moved on. The gang had no idea of the tension building in the house. They believed the day was theirs, that they had entered a defenseless place. She moved through her home, checking her positions, visualizing each potential action. Her mind was clear, focused, and alert. Every sound, every shadow, every shift in movement was absorbed. She was preparing not just for defense but for precision, ensuring that every choice she made would be the right one. She was calm, and that calm would give her the advantage when the time came. By late morning, the gang continued to search, unaware that they had underestimated her completely. They had mocked her, thought her weak, and assumed they could take whatever they wanted. They were wrong. She moved quietly, preparing, calculating, and watching. The sun was high, the heat beginning to settle on the land, but she was unaffected. She had faced more dangerous situations, and she knew how to wait. Every second of their overconfidence brought her closer to the moment when she would need to act. As they dispersed around the farm looking for anything valuable, one of them tripped over a small stone, cursing loudly. The others laughed at him, thinking it amusing. She watched silently, noting their reactions. They were careless, distracted, and arrogant. And that was exactly what she needed. Her hands rested briefly on her rifle, recalling the feel, the weight, the balance. She was ready, but she would not rush. Patience was her ally. Every mistake they made was a step toward her advantage. The day stretched on, and the tension on the farm increased without the gang realizing it. She was calm, patient, and observant. She had no fear, only focus. They thought themselves in control, but they were already trapped by their own recklessness. She waited quietly, knowing that soon, every action, every word, and every movement would matter. And when the moment came, she would act with skill and precision. The balance of power was about to shift, though they had no idea how powerful she truly was. The sun rose higher, warming the fields and casting sharp shadows across the farm. The gang had grown bolder, wandering closer to the house and barn without fear. Their laughter echoed loudly, their voices rough and careless. They assumed that the elderly woman could do nothing to stop them, that her age and quiet demeanor made her weak. They were wrong. Every movement, every step they took was watched, calculated, and recorded in her mind. She had spent decades learning to read people, to understand intention through subtle gestures and behavior. They were giving her all the information she needed. Inside her kitchen, she moved with purpose, though she appeared calm and slow. Pots and pans were arranged on the counters, breakfast dishes quietly washed, but her eyes were always on the windows. She could see them now, exploring the barn more thoroughly, kicking at crates, moving tools around, and laughing at their own bravado. One of them, clearly the leader, gave orders, trying to keep control over a group that was growing restless. He was arrogant, impatient, and easy to read. She noted every sign of weakness and every lapse in attention. These men believed they were invincible because they were young, loud, and careless. They were providing her a perfect opportunity. She walked slowly toward a small cabinet where her rifle was kept. She did not rush. Patience was as important now as it had ever been. She had trained herself to wait, to observe, to act only at the precise moment. Her fingers brushed the cold metal of the rifle, familiar and reassuring. She checked it quietly, ensuring it was ready without drawing attention. She could see every member of the gang now, scattered across her property, each unaware that their overconfidence was their weakness. She did not need to confront them directly. She only needed precision and timing. Outside, one of the gang members had ventured closer to the porch, picking up a rock and tossing it carelessly at the flower beds. The elderly woman stepped onto the porch, her gaze steady and calm. "That's not yours to throw," she said softly. The voice carried, though not with threat, but with authority. The young man froze, unsure if she was serious. The others noticed the pause and laughed, encouraging him to ignore her. But the hesitation had planted a seed of doubt. For the first time, their confidence wavered even slightly. She moved slowly back into the house, giving herself cover and a better view of the yard. From the window, she could see them checking the barn, some carrying tools, others throwing scraps of wood aside. She noted their positions, the way they moved, and the gaps in their formation. Years of experience in observation and strategy allowed her to anticipate their next moves. Every careless step they took was another advantage she could use. They had assumed the farm was theirs to take, but they were already in the wrong place, underestimating her in every way. The wind shifted slightly, carrying sounds of movement from the far edge of the property. One of the gang members, curious and reckless, had wandered toward the vegetable garden, brushing aside plants and stepping on leaves. She noticed his pattern, his attention to detail, or lack thereof, and filed it away mentally. He was reckless, predictable, and easily distracted. These traits would help her when the time came. She did not act yet. Patience was essential, and acting too soon could ruin everything she had planned. She moved to the side window that gave a clear line of sight toward the barn and driveway. The leader was shouting again, growing frustrated as some members failed to follow instructions. Their arrogance was blinding them to the danger that now surrounded them, though they did not know it. She could see every opportunity, every weak point, and she began to formulate a plan. It was a plan built on careful observation, patience, and precision. The gang had provided her everything she needed to act decisively. Inside, she moved quietly, checking a small trap she had set weeks before along the barn line. It was simple, designed to alert her if anyone passed a certain point. It would give her a warning if they tried to approach from an unexpected angle. Her hands moved methodically, adjusting the mechanism, ensuring it was ready. She had lived a life that demanded discipline and preparation, and she had not forgotten those lessons. Even in her peaceful retirement, she maintained vigilance. Today, it would matter more than ever. One of the gang members approached the back of the barn, searching for something of value. He bent down, completely unaware of the small bell trap she had placed. The faint chime went unnoticed by him, but she heard it. Her attention sharpened. He had triggered the first warning. She smiled faintly, pleased that her preparations were working. From her position, she could see him more clearly now, noting his posture, the way he moved, and the ease with which he could be intercepted if necessary. The gang had become more dispersed, their overconfidence leading them to forget coordination. The leader shouted again, urging them to stay focused, but their laughter and distractions continued. One of them picked up a hammer, tossing it aside carelessly, and another tripped over a crate, cursing loudly. Each mistake was valuable information. She did not act yet. She only observed, waiting for the exact right moment when her actions would be most effective. She moved to another position in the house, giving herself a better angle on the field behind the barn. The wind carried the sounds of the gang's movements, mixing with the natural noises of the farm. The combination of human error and environmental awareness gave her an advantage. She remembered her past experiences, times when observation and patience had saved her life. She relied on those lessons now. Every sound, every shadow, every step, every breath was part of a bigger picture. She had studied patterns like this before, and she understood how easily arrogance could be exploited. One of the younger gang members wandered near the chicken coop again, laughing as he tossed scraps of food at the birds. The woman remained inside, watching, noting the gaps between the group members. They had no coordination, no sense of caution, and their mistakes were compounding. Her heart remained steady, her breathing calm. She had been trained to act under pressure, but she knew that acting too soon could ruin everything. She was patient, and patience was a weapon. She glanced at the rifle again, feeling the familiar weight in her hands. It was not just a tool. It was a part of her experience, a link to decades of training and skill. She was ready, but she would not act until the right moment arrived. Outside, the gang continued their careless exploration, oblivious to the presence of someone who could turn the situation in an instant. They were providing her all the information she needed, all the mistakes she needed to exploit. The sun moved higher, casting long shadows across the farm. The gang began to grow more impatient, frustrated by the lack of easy rewards. Their laughter carried a hint of nervousness now, subtle but noticeable. The woman observed, noting the signs of tension and confusion. She could see which members were bold, which were cautious, and which could be distracted easily. Every detail was stored in her mind, creating a mental map of advantage and opportunity. She moved to the porch again, adjusting her shawl and stepping lightly to watch the driveway. A vehicle was parked haphazardly, its engine still warm, and the leader was pacing near the barn giving orders. The others were scattered, some climbing over fences, some tossing aside old tools, some laughing and mocking each other. They were confident, but their confidence was built on false assumptions. They did not understand patience, precision, or experience. They were about to learn the consequences of underestimating someone who had both. Inside, she checked another small device she had prepared, a simple indicator for movement near the perimeter of her property. It was subtle, but it would alert her if anyone approached from an unexpected direction. Every preparation she had made was coming together. She did not need to rush because the gang's mistakes were doing much of the work for her. She only needed to observe, calculate, and wait for the perfect moment. One of the gang members climbed partially into the barn loft, looking for valuables. She could see him from the window, noting the angle of his movement and the way he held himself. Every detail mattered. Every step he took was predictable because of his carelessness and overconfidence. The leader shouted again, frustrated, urging him to hurry. Their lack of coordination was now obvious, and the elderly woman silently noted every opportunity that presented itself. She would not act yet. She would wait until the moment when her skill and precision could achieve the maximum effect. The wind shifted again, carrying the sounds of birds and distant animals, masking some of the subtle noises of the gang. She used it to her advantage, listening closely to every disturbance, every sound that indicated movement. She could see the group now almost entirely spread out, each member distracted and unaware. Her preparation, patience, and observation had created the perfect situation. They believed the day was theirs, but they were trapped by their own arrogance and carelessness. And she had all the knowledge she needed to defend her home and land effectively. Time stretched slowly as she moved from window to window, porch to kitchen, maintaining awareness of every part of the property. The gang continued their careless exploration, unknowingly providing her with every piece of information necessary for action. Her heart remained steady, her hands relaxed but ready. She had the advantage, and she understood it fully. Every moment of observation brought her closer to the moment when she would act decisively. The farm was hers, and she would defend it. She was patient, calculated, and prepared, and soon the arrogance of the gang would meet the reality of her skill. The tension on the farm had reached its peak. The gang, still oblivious to the danger around them, had moved further into the property, their voices loud and careless. They joked about the old woman who lived here, mocking her age, her quiet ways, and the simplicity of her farm. They did not know that every word, every movement, every misstep was being recorded in her mind. She watched calmly, her breathing steady, her fingers lightly resting on the edge of her rifle. The day of reckoning had arrived. From the side window, she had the perfect view of the barn and the yard beyond. One of the younger men, overconfident and reckless, had wandered toward the far fence searching for something valuable. She noticed the angle of his approach, the way his weight shifted with each step, the rhythm of his movement. He was careless, distracted, and predictable. Her eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with focus. Years of training and experience guided her hand, her mind calculating distance, trajectory, and timing. She moved silently to a more concealed position near the back of the house, her rifle ready but still hidden. Her presence was calm, composed, yet every muscle in her body was alert. She remembered every drill, every moment of discipline, every lesson she had learned in her past life. The gang had underestimated her completely, and that would be their mistake. She waited, letting their arrogance lead them into position. A sudden movement caught her eye. One of the men had begun climbing the fence near the edge of the property. He laughed at something the others had said, unaware of how visible he was from her vantage point. She adjusted her aim quietly, taking careful consideration of the distance, the wind, and the angle. She had no intention of harming more than necessary. Her goal was control, precision, and to ensure that the invaders understood they were not welcome. The first warning shot rang out, sharp and clear, slicing through the air with authority. The sound startled the gang, causing them to jump and scatter. The bullet struck a nearby post, embedding itself with a loud thud, mere inches from the man climbing the fence. His laughter turned into a gasp of shock. The others froze, realizing for the first time that the woman was not powerless. Panic began to ripple through their group. She did not rush. She waited for the next move, observing how they reacted. Some ducked behind vehicles. Others sprinted toward the barn, seeking cover. Her second shot was deliberate, striking a crate near the barn where another man had crouched. The noise was deafening, a warning that became a message. She had control of the battlefield, and they were beginning to understand it. Fear, confusion, and surprise spread among them. The leader tried to regain composure, shouting orders, attempting to organize the group. His voice carried authority, but it was cracked with uncertainty. They looked to him for direction, but the presence of someone capable and precise had disrupted their confidence. She adjusted her aim, not hurriedly but with calm precision. Every shot she took was calculated, each one reinforcing the message that the farm was defended by someone far beyond their expectation. One man, desperate and reckless, tried to flank her position, moving along the edge of the barn. She tracked him easily, noting the movement, the way he shifted weight, the misstep in his stride. Her next shot struck a wooden post near his foot, startling him and forcing him to stumble back. His colleagues shouted at him, urging caution, but fear had begun to take hold. The calm demeanor of the elderly woman contrasted sharply with their chaos, showing the control she possessed. She moved silently to another window, keeping the group within her sight, adjusting angles as necessary. She did not need to be everywhere at once. Her planning and observation allowed her to cover the battlefield efficiently. The gang was beginning to realize that every move they made was being watched, and every misstep could have consequences. Her presence was invisible yet undeniable, commanding respect through action and precision. A young man tried to dash toward the porch, perhaps seeking a distraction or trying to escape. She anticipated his movement, calculating trajectory and distance with ease. A shot rang out, striking the ground just in front of him. He stumbled back, shouting in surprise and fear. The others began shouting warnings to each other, realizing that their assumptions had been dangerously wrong. The farm was not a safe playground, and the woman they mocked was a force they could not comprehend. The leader, now visibly shaken, tried to rally his men, urging them to retreat or regroup. But the unity they had relied on was shattered. Fear had replaced confidence, and hesitation now ruled their actions. She used their mistakes to her advantage, positioning herself strategically, ensuring that she maintained control without unnecessary aggression. Every action was deliberate, measured, and effective. The wind shifted slightly, carrying sounds of movement from one of the vehicles. She adjusted her aim subtly, keeping focus on the nearest threats. One member tried to climb into the truck bed, thinking he could find cover or a tool. She anticipated the movement, taking a calculated shot that landed near his feet. The noise caused him to lose balance, tumbling partially into the truck bed and yelping in alarm. The others screamed at him to be careful, but panic had begun to dominate their decisions. She moved quietly, repositioning for a better angle, ensuring she had full visibility of the barn and yard. Her rifle rested steadily against her shoulder, her breathing even, her mind clear. Years of experience guided every decision, and she used her skills to control the situation without unnecessary harm. The gang, now fully aware of the danger, began to retreat, but she allowed them only as much leeway as necessary. She maintained the upper hand, demonstrating authority without losing composure. One of the men tried to make a sudden dash toward the driveway, thinking escape was possible. She anticipated the movement, taking a careful, precise shot that struck near a fence post in his path. The thud of impact and the suddenness of the event caused him to skid to a stop, realizing that any rash movement could be catastrophic. Fear gripped the group, and the leader shouted for everyone to fall back, his confidence eroded by the precision and control of the elderly woman. She remained calm, observing every retreating step, every movement they made. Her aim was deliberate, not reckless, and she allowed them to realize the consequences of overconfidence. Every shot, every action reinforced her control of the situation. The gang, scattered and disoriented, now understood that their assumptions had been foolish. They had underestimated someone who was patient, skilled, and focused. They had walked into a situation far beyond their comprehension. The sun moved across the sky, shadows shifting, but she remained vigilant. She did not celebrate, did not shout, and did not act impulsively. Her actions were measured, each one reinforcing the lesson that carelessness and arrogance had consequences. The gang's retreat became more organized, though fear still ruled them. They had learned at last that the elderly woman on this farm was not to be underestimated. She lowered her rifle slowly, ensuring that the threat had diminished. The remaining members scrambled to their vehicles, shouting orders, urging each other to flee. The chaos of the morning had shifted entirely in her favor. Her calm, precise actions had taken control of the battlefield and demonstrated her mastery of strategy and skill. She watched them leave, ensuring that the last of the threats had exited her property. The farm fell silent once more. Birds returned cautiously. The wind rustled softly through the fields and the distant sound of engines faded. She remained still for a moment, breathing deeply, feeling the tension leave her body. The day had been dangerous, but she had maintained control with precision, patience, and skill. She moved slowly back into her home, her hands still steady, her mind clear. She had defended her property and life without unnecessary aggression, demonstrating that experience and intelligence could overcome arrogance and recklessness. Her eyes scanned the farm one last time from the porch, noting that all intruders had left. She could see where mistakes had been made, where overconfidence had ruled, and how careful planning had secured her victory. She had not needed to escalate violence unnecessarily. Her control, observation, and precision had been more than enough to ensure safety. She allowed herself a small, quiet smile, knowing that she had taught a valuable lesson without compromising her integrity. The afternoon sun warmed the farm, and she returned to her routine, checking on her animals, tidying the yard, and breathing in the calm that had returned. The experience had been tense, frightening, and revealing, but it had also affirmed her strength and preparedness. The gang had left, humbled and shaken, while she remained steady, confident, and capable. Her home, her land, and her peace had been defended, and she had done so with the skill and control that had defined her life long before the farm had become her refuge. The farm was quiet now, almost too quiet. The gang had fled, their arrogance shattered and their spirits broken. The sun was high in the sky, warming the fields that had been tense with danger just hours before. The elderly woman stood on the porch for a long moment, breathing deeply and letting the calm wash over her. She looked out at her land, her home, and the animals she cared for, knowing that she had protected everything she held dear. The danger was gone, but the lesson lingered. She was not to be underestimated. She walked slowly through the yard, checking the crops and the animals. Everything seemed in order, though she noticed a few things disturbed by the intruders. A chicken had wandered into the barn, a gate was slightly off its latch, and some tools had been shifted from their usual spots. She fixed each problem carefully, quietly, without hurry. Each action was deliberate, showing her attention to detail and the calm that had carried her through the morning. The farm had survived, and so had she. Neighbors had begun to notice signs of what had happened. A few cautious eyes peeked over fences and from nearby houses. They whispered to each other, surprised that the gang had been driven off by one elderly woman. Word would spread quickly, but she paid it little mind. Her concern was for the safety of her home, the peace of her farm, and the life she had built for herself. The recognition of others, while interesting, was secondary to her sense of duty and protection. She returned to the house, checking doors and windows to ensure everything was secure. Her hands moved carefully, inspecting locks, latches, and any weak points. Years of experience had taught her that preparation was always key, and though the immediate threat was gone, she remained vigilant. She took time to settle, sitting in her favorite chair, looking out the window at the wide fields that stretched to the horizon. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to process the events of the morning. It had been intense, frightening, and exhausting, but she had emerged in control, calm, and victorious. As the afternoon wore on, she thought about the gang and the arrogance that had led them here. They had underestimated her, assumed her age and quiet nature meant weakness, and they had been wrong. The lesson was clear, though it would be a long time before they realized it fully. She did not take pleasure in their fear, only satisfaction in the protection of what mattered. Her skill, patience, and discipline had ensured safety without unnecessary aggression, a balance she valued deeply. Her mind wandered briefly to the past, to a life that had trained her for situations like this. She remembered the hours of discipline, the countless drills, the focus on precision and control. The past life had shaped her into the person she was today, capable of handling danger with calmness and strategy. The farm, simple and quiet as it seemed, was a reflection of that discipline. a place where preparation and patience mattered as much as strength. A soft breeze carried the scent of fresh soil and growing crops, a reminder of the life she maintained and the peace that could return. She walked through the fields, touching the leaves of the vegetables, checking the irrigation channels and ensuring the animals were calm. Her presence reassured them as much as her skill had reassured her. Everything had its place, and now that the threat had passed, the farm returned to its rhythm, guided by her care and attention. Occasionally, she glanced toward the horizon, knowing that the gang had retreated but understanding that the world outside her farm could be unpredictable. She felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she was ready, that her experience, her skill, and her calm determination could meet any challenge. She did not need to show off or boast. Her actions spoke louder than words. She had protected her home and her peace, and that was all that mattered. Visitors came later in the day, neighbors and local authorities who had heard rumors of the morning's events. They approached cautiously, unsure what to expect. The elderly woman greeted them politely, her demeanor calm and unshaken. She explained what had happened in simple terms without exaggeration, emphasizing the importance of vigilance and preparation. The visitors listened, some in awe, some in quiet respect. They saw the calm strength she carried, the presence of someone who had lived a life of discipline and skill, and they understood that appearances could be deceiving. The authorities took notes, spoke with the neighbors, and ensured that the gang would not return. The elderly woman watched quietly, satisfied that the immediate danger was gone. She did not seek recognition, only security and peace. Her day continued, filled with the routines of farm life, feeding animals, checking crops, maintaining the house. Yet now, every action carried the subtle weight of accomplishment, the knowledge that she had defended her home and herself with skill and intelligence. As evening approached, the sky painted with shades of orange and pink, she sat on the porch again. The farm was quiet, the animals settled, and the fields bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. She allowed herself a small smile, thinking about the day and the lessons it had reinforced. Patience, observation, preparation, and calm action were her greatest allies. The gang had learned, albeit painfully, that arrogance and underestimation had consequences. She reflected on her life, understanding that this was just one of many challenges she had faced, though perhaps the first in years. The farm was her sanctuary, her place of peace, but she knew that her past had equipped her to defend it. The combination of experience, skill, and calm determination had ensured safety without unnecessary conflict. The farm remained hers, secure and protected, a testament to her resilience and intelligence. The neighbors had begun to spread word of what had happened, stories growing in awe and respect for the woman who had defended her home with precision and calmness. She did not seek attention, but she understood that respect was deserved. She had shown that strength was not always visible, that age and appearance could be misleading, and that preparation and skill could overcome recklessness and arrogance. Night fell over the farm, stars twinkling above, and a soft breeze rustled through the crops. She went inside, completing her evening routines, feeding the animals one last time and ensuring that everything was secure for the night. She felt the satisfaction of a day completed, the calm assurance that her home, her land, and her peace had been defended effectively. She settled into bed, her mind clear, her body tired but steady. The farm was quiet, safe, and hers. In the days that followed, life returned to its usual rhythm. The crops continued to grow, the animals thrived, and the quiet strength of the elderly woman remained a constant presence. Neighbors occasionally came by, sharing stories of the morning and expressing quiet respect. She listened politely, but her focus remained on the farm, the work, and the simple peace of daily life. The events had passed, but the lessons endured. Confidence must be tempered with caution. Arrogance can be dangerous, and preparation and skill are invaluable. She spent her time maintaining her land, tending to the animals and living the quiet life she had built for herself. The memory of the gang's intrusion was there, but it did not dominate her life. Instead, it reinforced her confidence, her vigilance, and her understanding of the importance of skill, patience, and calm action. The farm, simple and quiet as it seemed, was a place of resilience, a reflection of her own life and experience. The days passed, and the farm remained secure. The elderly woman continued her routines, calm, collected, and confident. She had faced danger, controlled the situation, and ensured the safety of her home without unnecessary aggression. Her story, though quiet, became a lesson for those who knew it. A reminder that skill, experience, and calm determination could protect even the most unassuming of places. The farm thrived under her care, a testament to her resilience, intelligence, and quiet strength.